It's a joy to be here tonight.
Why is it?
Right, Rabbi?
Why?
Listen, you know, I've had the pleasure and the responsibility of making a lot of speeches following events, and there's always kind of a itinerary that we follow. You thank the sponsors, you acknowledge the host club and the staff, and you introduce the champions. Tonight, this is special for me, Rabbi, because I'm here to introduce not only a special friend, but a very special man. I salute the MGA on the selection of Dave Catalano as this year's Distinguished Service Award winner. And I want to put something in perspective to you. If you look at the past winners of this award, some of whom Gene just introduced, most of them were members of the golf administration world, officials, volunteers, journalists, great players, people whose role in golf was tremendous and who served the game. I want you to think for a second about Dave Catalano. He served a facility. He served a region. He served an agency. He served a state. He served a governor. He served the taxpayers of New York State. Did all that while making so many contributions to the game of golf, locally, nationally, and internationally. That, to me, is distinguished service. I want to forget about the U.S. Open for a minute, and I'm going to let David talk a little bit about his relationship with David. Talk about what Dave Catalano has done for the men area and for local golf. Talked a lot about the Kerry Cup tonight, which they hosted. Annual host of the State Open, New York State Open. Hosted the Met Open, hosted the Bethpage, hosted the Assistants Championship, hosted the Junior Championship, hosted the High School Championships, hosted the Eastern Amputee Association, hosted the Women's Event, hosted the Long Island Open, hosted the Long Island Amateur, hosted charity events, and hosted corporate events. And you might say, well, you know, Bethpage can do that. Most, if not all of that, was done within the last 15 years, which is when Dave Catalano has been at Bethpage. And I think you start to understand the impact that he's having in the golf world. But we don't want to forget what his role was with the U.S. Open and what he meant to golf in that arena. And I always like to refer to the 2002 U.S. Open and even 2009 as the story of the three C's. Because not only was there Dave Catalano, there was Bernadette Castro, who we've heard about tonight, and Craig Currier. And there were others as well. Governor Pataki, politically correct to make sure we acknowledge his role. Reese Jones and what he did in rebuilding the golf course. And of course my good friend David Fay, who had the vision, the courage, and the dream to bring the U.S. Open to Bethpage. Incredible vision. But he will acknowledge, and I'm sure if those of you who have read John Feinstein's book, that there was one very important ingredient that Bethpage needed in order to pull off the Open, and that was a point man. And Dave Catalano was that point man. And Bernadette Castro saw that too. Her talent in selecting and allowing people to lead, her respect for Dave and his ability to run Bethpage State Park, and her incredible ability to convince the state of New York to get out of the way and let Dave do his job with an outstanding staff that he amassed at Bethpage was an incredible testimony to somebody's total faith in the people that worked for her. In 1995, the first discussion started about the U.S. Open. In 1997, Dave's most challenging decision had to be made. He had to hire a golf course superintendent. Now that's enough for most of us who are around golf to try to decide who's the right person to try and take care of our asset? How about over 1,000 acres? How about 5 golf courses? How about preparing for US Open? Why not give it to a 27-year-old assistant? What the hell? Let it go. But Dave saw the talent, the energy, the enthusiasm, and the expertise in a young man. And that decision not only was, I think, his most important, I would venture to say it may have been his most rewarding. Because what followed that decision was not only a success at Bethpage, but a relationship that was more akin to a father and son than to an employer and employee. It was a great selection and one that has readily been revisited and championed through the years. 2002 wasn't the end. Soon after that championship was concluded, negotiations began for 2009. And Bernadette, in her own inimitable fashion, had the audacity, let me say the wisdom, to say to Dave and Craig, we can do this again if you guys will stay together, and if you'll stay here at Bethpage. Now Craig was young and foolish still, so he said yes. Dave was probably old and tired and probably too weak to say no, but he made the decision to stay on at Bethpage. And just for those of you that understand the political machinations and what it means to be a municipal worker, I would say he probably lost money every year that he continued to work at Bethpage. But it was his dedication, his passion, and his leadership that never let a day go by when he didn't enjoy coming to Bethpage and preparing for the 2009 US Open. Somewhat delayed, a rather soggy, but an incredible accomplishment that year because I'm not sure any other facility in the country could have completed that championship the way they did and with the success they did. But for me, there's an indelible image, and it kind of brings me back to my first comments. On the 18th green, after the 2002 US Open, stood Tiger Woods, obviously, all the representatives of the state, Craig, Bernadette, Governor Pataki waiting to speak, David Fay, and Dave Catalano. And Dave had a smile that only those of us who have heard him growl can really appreciate. And for John Feinstein, he said that was the symbol of the US Open. What Dave Catalano had pulled off was an incredible, incredible feat. He made the USGA and David Fay's dream come true in a way that very few championships could ever have attained. And as I said, I have the opportunity to thank sponsors, benefactors like Bethpage, because they have supported us, to appreciate host facilities like Bethpage, that have done so much not only for the PGA but for the golf world, and to honor champions. To me, Dave Catalano is a true champion. And there were 2 champions up on that green that night, and I think David Fay will add to the story of Dave Catalano and tell you about how much he appreciated that dream coming true. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Charlie. That was wonderful and elegant. I sort of think I'm a bit like Dave Anderson at PSA winner may remember this. When the Congress had the hearings in 1957 about the limited antitrust in Major League Baseball, and they had one speaker, they had Casey Stengel, the manager of the New York Yankees. Unlike Charlie, Casey rambled on and on, but he didn't know where he was going. No one else did either. The next speaker was Mickey Mantle, and all he said was, I agree with everything that Casey just said. But truly, it's great to look out at this crowd and to see, well, to see the Rat Pack from the 2002 U.S. Open. I mean, that's it. You've got Bernadette. My God, what you did, your enthusiasm. I mean, it was so important. I mean, to get the governor with that attention, and he committed to it. Of course, you had Reese, who did the golf course for nothing. Then you had Craig, golf course superintendent extraordinaire. My spiritual advisor, Mark Gelman. Cashed in a lot of IOUs, I think. And I can't overstate my friend of over 61 years, and I am 61, Jay Matone. The reality is this, and I'm going to keep this rather brief because I think I can sum it up pretty succinctly. The organizational glue, the thing that really made it work, not only in 2002, but 2009, was this man right here. Because the reality is that the U.S. Open is very important to us, obviously, and very important to most golfers. But work on that Open was just a sliver of what Dave Catalano does. It wasn't just about the U.S. Open. It wasn't even just about golf. This man committed his life to the Bethpage State Park, and boy, is it so much better for it. But for me, even though I knew that Bernadette had spoken with Craig and Dave and had gotten their commitment, I must say I'm a little bit skeptical. I figured, well, Craig, again, he's young. He'd probably get the A-Rod thing somewhere. He'd move on. And I heard all of the commitments, and I remember before going again forward to the USGA, I turned to Dave and I looked at you and I said, Dave, are you going to be there in 2009? And Dave Catalano is a man of his word. And he said yes. And when Dave Catalano says yes, you know he means it. And you're here. It's really important. I have had the privilege of knowing every single Distinguished Service Award winner, from Guest Benedict right through to Paul Dillon last year. And somehow I slipped through a couple of years ago. And I can tell you one thing. I am so proud and honored to be a member of the MGA Distinguished Service Award fraternity sorority group. And all I can say, Dave, is that you receiving this award is so well deserved, and you are going to enrich this award by accepting it. And I salute you with all my heart.
Well, that was pretty stirring. I hope I can get through my remarks. I will do my best, I assure you. It is truly a joy to be here today.
Why would that be?
I'll let you know in a few minutes. A couple of weeks ago, I was at my new home in Wading River. We were working around the house, and I got a telephone call from Gene Bernstein, and I didn't take it. I ultimately called him back, and he told me that I had been awarded the MGA Distinguished Service Award, and I was so overwhelmed and humbled by the notion that I began speaking, I think, in some foreign language. It was like gibberish. And by the time I hung up, I said to myself, I don't know what I said to this man who I respect and have known for years. I was concerned he thought I was either drunk or on some controlled substance. But I assure you that was not the case. Again, I want to say I'm overwhelmed. To to be mentioned in the same breath as Paul Dillon and Reese Jones, Dave Anderson, Gene Westmoreland, one of my personal heroes, David Fay, Charlie Robson, and the others. It's a privilege and an honor I will cherish always. I want to thank Chairman Gene Bernstein, the entirety of the Board of Directors, Kate Keller, who brought off the Carriage Cup in remarkable fashion, Gene McCooey, Brian Mahoney, who we've worked with closely through the years, Jeannie too, and Executive Director Jane Matola. Again, for the recommendation to David to bring the Open to Bethpage. You have an incredible staff. I've been thanked for how much I've done for you. Trust me, the MGA has done far more for Bethpage in the game of golf than I've ever done for you. And we thank you all for your expertise, your dedication in raising Bethpage to a new level. Thank you all. I regret that I'm not going to be able to thank the hundreds of people who have assisted me throughout my career, who have meant so much to me personally. People from the Met PGA section, from the USGA, the State of New York, Bethpage State Park, the Long Island Golf Association. Being involved in the game of golf has been an incredible experience. The caliber of people who play the game, who have made the game their lives and their careers, is beyond comprehension. It's a class act from start to finish, and I'm very proud to be a part of it, any small part of it. There's a saying, friendship isn't about who you've known the longest. It's about those who came and never left your side. And I have some people I brought with me tonight that I want to introduce, my friends. Lee Berticelli. I've known him for over 20 years. He's been my assistant at Bethpage for the past 15. The remarkable feats he accomplished during the United States Open, our fundraisers, and every day that he is at Bethpage have elevated this park to a status that is a world-class status. And we thank you, Lee, for your dedication. And I thank you. To my good friend Brian Ziegler, who I met 15 to 16 years ago. When I first met him, I was rather skeptical. Bernadette decided we needed a tournament director at Bethpage. I said to myself, this is going to be an enormous headache. I can assure you I was totally mistaken. Brian has become a close personal friend. He's provided pro bono legal assistance for many staff at Bethpage. Some of them really needed it badly. But more importantly, he served as the tournament director for the Commissioners Cup and the Empire Cup, both Bernadette's imagination and initiatives, and raised over $1.3 million that has been spent back at Bethpage to keep that park in great shape. Brian, you're amazing. To Charlie Robson, a consummate professional, a longtime advocate for Bethpage, a close personal friend. He's honored us by bringing the state open to Bethpage for 16 consecutive years now. There is no one I have counted on more closely to provide me with mentoring advice on the game of golf. And it's been an enormous assistance to anything we've achieved at Bethpage, and Charlie, you are the best. To my boss, Ron Foley, who is my closest personal friend, who I've entrusted my life to. He's taught me the virtue of patience, the true meaning of public service. And he demands excellence from himself first, before demanding it from anyone else. He's truly a great person and my best friend. Thank you. Sarah Moffat. I even remembered your last name is not Catalano anymore. My beautiful daughter, who's been gifted with her mother's beauty, grace and intelligence, and has been burdened by her father's ill temper. And finally, to Lynette Ritchie, my life's partner, my greatest supporter, for your toleration and for taking care of me. You are the best, and I love you. My adopted son, who I will refer to in a few minutes, from my perspective, and it's pretty easy for me to say this, I appointed myself as the historian at Bethpage State Park. I have no competition, so that's good. The park has been in operation for 80 years, beginning in 1932. I began there in 1967, so I've been there for more than half the existence of the park. But in my mind, in this 80-year history, there are 8 individuals, 8, it's not many, who stand as the most influential and most important shapers of the history of this state park, which is the most magnificent golf facility in the world. And I want to share those people with you. First, Robert Moses. Imagine the master builder of New York conceiving of building this facility in the 1930s, amidst the Depression, 4 great golf courses in central Long Island. Robert Moses, unbelievable. His brilliant decision to employ A.W. Tillinghast as the architect who laid out, as far as we're concerned, Reese, correct? 3 of the golf courses at Bethpage State Park. Joseph Perbeck, the first park superintendent, who served in that position from 1932 to 1963, whose hand guided the development of the facility, but I assure you he did not architect the golf courses at Bethpage State Park. Reese Jones, for his brilliant design and the renovation of the golf course in 1997, for his kindnesses and friendship, his guidance. You're one of the most stand-up guys I've ever met, and for buying Rudy Giuliani lunch. For the Queen Mother of State Parks, Bernadette Catalano. Whose unswerving support, and I assure you it was unswerving, and demand for perfection. I can also assure you she is quite the taskmaster for a diminutive lady. Enabled the staff to achieve what we believe the unthinkable. When the naysayers appeared in the beginning, those bunglers in the state of New York will never pull this off. Believe me, she was behind us all the way and made life extremely easy. And we can never repay that debt. Thank you. President George Buchanan, for his wisdom in accepting the challenge that Bethpage served as the host of the U.S. Open in 2002 and 2009. Craig Curry, for his tireless efforts, his skill, his commitment to excellence in transforming playing conditions at Bethpage from the unacceptably poor to the unimaginably incredible. In a matter of 10 years, I've never known anybody with the dedication, the work ethic, the commitment, and the love for a task more than he, particularly starting out as a 27-year-old kid. And he makes me proud every day I know him and every day I see him. And finally, the second coming of Moses. And that would be David Fay. Bad thing about going second, third, or fourth when people are making speeches, because they tend to steal a lot of your material. It's almost like they were looking over your shoulder when you were preparing things. But I used the word for the audacity and the risk-taking when you decided to bring the United States Open to Bethpage, a truly public golf course for the first time in the history of that hallowed championship. Your decision has altered the face of public golf and the game of golf and Bethpage State Park forever. We will always be in your debt, and I don't know that people realize what impact it had on that facility as a result of your decision. It gave the state of New York cause or purpose to invest in that facility and to fulfill the Moses Pledge from the 1930s that Bethpage would be the People's Country Club, because it certainly was not. But by 1997, it had become the People's Country Club. And while the U.S. Opens were great, they're not the real story. The U.S. Opens allowed the facility to develop itself and to provide a set of playing conditions for the general public, none of which they had ever seen in their careers or their lives. And now they've had it every single day for 16 years. And my hat's off to you. In closing, I wish to share a few thoughts on Bethpage, what it has meant to me and to so many others. And I'd like you to think about some of these things. In the 1930s, Bethpage State Park provided gainful employment to over 1,800 individuals during its construction in the midst of the Great Depression, and for many years thereafter, providing income for many families in great need. Bethpage served as a source of employment to tens of thousands of youngsters who were introduced to the game of golf as caddies from its opening in 1932 until the early 1970s, when sadly golf carts were introduced and the caddies more or less disappeared. There have been over 18 million rounds of golf played at Bethpage since its opening in 1932. Imagine the numbers of people who had the opportunity to be introduced to this game, enjoy this game at that facility is nothing short of incredible. Charlie listed a bunch of tournaments that we host, but I wanted to point out again, and I'll repeat it, Bethpage serves our community and hosts or has hosted the Long Island Open, the Met Open, the New York State Open for 16 consecutive years, the Long Island High School Championships for boys and for girls, the Nassau County Championships for boys and for girls, the New York State Federation of High School Championships, the National Amputee Golf Association, the Eastern Regional Amputee Golf Association, the Met PGA Assistants Championship, the Michael Hepburn Amateur Championship, the March of Dimes Joe Namath Outing, the Long Island Women's Stroke Play Championship, and trust me, they're on the wall. And Bethpage does not host these things every 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, but most of these events are hosted on an annual basis. And we're able to do that because of the incredible staff that work every day at Bethpage State Park. In the 1930s, Chester Blakelock, who I'm certain none of you have ever heard of, Parks historian, dubbed Bethpage as the Mecca of public golf. Frankly, I believe a more appropriate moniker would have been Bethpage is the melting pot of public golf. For at Bethpage, whether one is wealthy or poor, old or young, healthy or infirm, famous or anonymous, black or white, Catholic or Jew, Italian or Irish, makes no difference. All are welcome. However, I might point out very few ever break par. I've been a blessed man. I have a great family. I have great friends. I've lived in the greatest golf facility in the world. I've worked with the greatest people in the game of golf. Frankly, I've been overly complimented and honored, but I assure you my appreciation of it all knows no bounds. My deepest thanks for your kindness and your consideration. It's been my honor to be a part of this evening, God bless you all, and please enjoy the remainder of the day.